Hey everybody, it is Steve Garvin for another one of our Stories of Gold conversations, and I am joined today by Talia Dashow. And Talia has been using creativity to heal, learn, grow, and connect all of her life, such that now it's hardwired in her. When Talia was little, she believed she was worthless and that the only way she could be worthwhile is to change into whatever her parents wanted her to be. How many of you can relate to that? I know I can. Over the years, she's used creativity, especially where it intersects with spirituality, to love herself just the way she is. It turns out that's what her parents wanted for her anyway. I can also relate to that. Along the way, Talia has earned a BA in English at UC Berkeley, a certificate as a volunteer mediator, and a certificate to lead Lego serious play workshops. How fun is that? With decades of experience in transforming our own life, Talia has expert tips and tricks to share with you to help you quiet your inner critic and find your inner guidance. Welcome to our Stories of Gold conversation today, Talia.
How are you? Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing great. How about you?
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did your interest in creativity begin? Was there an inciting incident?
So I've been making things all my life. It's something I enjoy doing. And I used to collect cardboard and boxes in my room. And my parents hated that because my room was always messy, but I would always make stuff out of it. And I would make little models out of things out of cardboard. And I made dollhouse furniture, and then I put on a shelf because I didn't have a dollhouse. And I've always made stuff. But I didn't think anything of it until I took this course maybe 12 or 15 years ago with some very, very smart people who talked about everybody has something that they do that is as natural as breathing, that no one else does quite like that. And so many of us don't value it because it comes as naturally as breathing. It doesn't seem like it has any worth, and only the things that we work really hard for have any value. And their point was, no, actually what you do automatically is your gift. And if you can find a way to harness that and bring it to life, that's huge. So the things that I uncovered in that course was that I bring play, creativity, and community building to everything I do. It's just every job, every volunteer, every, fun thing. It's always around these issues. So I started just researching what do people do? How can I make a living with play? And that's when I learned about Lego serious play and went and got certified in it, because it was like, there's play in it. I want to do that.
So tell me what that process was like. And let me preface that by saying, when my oldest son, who's now 26, was 12, and we were living here in Asheville, North Carolina, I had promised him previously, when we were living in Washington State, that I'd take him to Legoland in San Diego. And I wasn't expecting to be 2,000 plus miles away when I took him, but that's the way it worked out. And we went to San Diego, went to Legoland. And one of the reasons he wanted to go to Legoland is because he just loved Legos, as so many kids, including myself, do. And Legoland was just this amazing place where the world was created with Legos, and it was just really pretty amazing. So tell me your side. How did you become certified to be a Lego play counselor? What was it?
It's Lego serious play is the methodology.
Okay.
I've been to Legoland twice. My kid also loves Legos, so it's a great place. But it's different than Lego serious play. Lego serious play was developed, so the story goes, I have this all third hand, so I can't verify it, that the people in Lego corporate said, our company is about play, but our boardroom has nothing playful about it. So we need to do something about that. So they hired some really smart people to study brains and hands and play and all the stuff. And what they learned is that there is this really direct connection between hands and the brain, that not only when you're using left and right hands, you're accessing right and left brain, like that it crosses and you get the whole brain that way. But also when we evolved out of the trees, our hands started to change to adapt to being able to grasp tools and make things like with fine motor skill. And our brain had to evolve to accommodate this. And also our vision changed because we were no longer just in the canopy. We had to be able to see farther away. And so our brains changed in response to our hands changing, and our hands changed in response to our brain changing. And there's this really direct connection. So when you use your hands, you access parts of your brain that you don't get to if you're just talking or writing. So it's this really neat synergy. And then on top of that, if you build your idea out of Lego and you can hold your idea, you don't have to hold it in your head. So when someone else is talking, you can be confident that your idea is still held there and you don't have to say, this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to say. And it gives you space in your head to be able to hear other people. And you get to listen with your eyes because you get to look at with the models that other people built. And it gives you a better understanding of what they're trying to say. And then you can take the models that people have built and put them together in interesting ways. And there's just so much possibility. I really enjoyed working with it. I just wasn't very good at selling it.
I got it. So tell me how the serious part of the play comes in. Did they use that methodology in the boardrooms, or?
They did. There's actually a lot of serious work that can be done with play. On the most basic level, you can do team building. My favorite was actually working with teams that had been two separate teams and were now merging together to be one team, to build what did you like about your team culture before the merger, and how can we keep those things in the culture and bring in the things from the other team that they liked from their culture and put them together to make a culture that's going to work for everybody. Because it's so easy to like blame the other side and, you know, not trust people. And so this really gives people a chance to be on the same page or the same plate, Lego plate or something. But you can do a strategic planning with Lego. You can build a model of the company and all the different pieces of the company, and then build the things that can affect the company from the outside, and then figure out where they connect to the company. And then you can manipulate the things on the outside and see where it breaks. Like if you have one manufacturer and you run the scenario, what happens if the manufacturer goes out of business? Suddenly you have no product. So it broke. And so you can have the idea, okay, something we should look into is getting more than one manufacturer. Or what happens if this product becomes wildly popular because it's been featured on, well, at the time it was Oprah. And suddenly we don't have enough people to make it or train in it or whatever it is. And so that's a place that we could look to our company to see if we can keep it from the company from breaking in real life by breaking the model of it.
Wow. You know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about how writing and speaking use similar processes. You know, that as I write things, I grab something from here and I grab something from here and, you know, see how they come together. And it's interesting through my writing process, one of the things that I learned that I could do is I could either build walls around myself, you know, kind of silo myself, maybe create one of those like the Taj Mahal in Legoland around myself, but also I can build bridges with words and story and the way that I communicate with others and with myself, that it can be a synergistic experience rather than just a isolationary experience.
Yeah. One of the things that you just said about taking a little bit from here and a little bit from there, I think that's kind of how creativity works. Like so many people think that creativity is like this bolt of lightning and it hits you or it doesn't. You're creative or you're not. And um, in my experience, creativity thrives on having lots of different uh, pieces of input to connect with other things. And that the creative things come from, oh, what if I take something from over here and something from over here and put them together in a way that maybe other people haven't done before? Oh, this is something new. What can we do with this? Um, in fact, I saw that happening when people were looking for Legos. Like, I need a piece to fit into this model. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking for, but I'm going to look on the table and look at the pieces and figure out which pieces go here to make the thing. And sometimes you get happy accidents. There's a connection you didn't expect, and suddenly, oh, this gives it meaning.
Right. So tell me how that applies to imposter syndrome. How do you, can you use Legos to overcome imposter syndrome? I know you can use creativity.
Yes, the short answer. I use creativity as a microcosm to look at the stories in our heads that come up. And I know that those stories came up for people when I was doing Legos with them as well. That I would have people sitting around a table all building a tower, and one person is like, well, mine should be taller. And the next person's like, how could they build so fast? And there's somebody else who's like, I need to sort all my pieces before I can even think about building. And wait, we're done. And so there's a lot of stories that people end up with, that comparing themselves to other people and thinking they should be different and should be something. And those are the stories that I'm interested in looking at. And so however they come up, whether it's with Legos or a drawing prompt, sometimes I tell people, okay, you've got 30 seconds to draw your neighbor, go. And okay, now show your neighbor. Like, are you proud of this piece? It's usually a lot of, I'm sorry.
That actually reminds me, when I was a part of a cartoonist group in Tacoma, and one of the things we did occasionally was have models, well, people to model for us come in, and then we'd draw them. Mm-hmm. And I'd never done that before in my life. I mean, at least not intentionally like that. I'd, see someone walking by and I'd draw a little cartoon or something, but that was it. But here we had someone that dressed up in, I don't know, as Catwoman garb or something like that. And we all sat around and drawing her. And at the end, she's like, I want to see what you guys have created. And I was just like, oh gosh, no. But she was just so enthused about what I had done and saw a whole lot more in it than what I saw. But that imposter syndrome, I can't do this because I don't have the tools. I'm not a, I don't draw people from life. I draw little monsters that are, don't have to fit any kind of parameter or reality. But that doesn't mean that it's not valuable, that we're playing an a role that doesn't fit.
Actually, that's one reason I like doing the group that I run, because so often people will say, I don't like this. And someone else will say, really? I love it. And just that, when I first experienced that with somebody I trusted who said that they liked something that I had made that I didn't like, it opened up the possibility that maybe the stories in my head that told me it was terrible were wrong. And yes. I had never believed that before. And then once I lived in that space long enough, it was able to open up this possibility that maybe the stories that tell me that I'm no good are also wrong. But it needed that space from somebody I trusted looking at something that I made saying, I like it. There's value here. You did something really neat. to start that transformation. So that's why I do this in a group, is because you get people be able to see things in each other that they can't see in themselves.
Yes. I can relate to that for a number of reasons. One of the earliest memories I have in my speaking experience, I had been a Toastmaster for a year or so, and I was still struggling pretty heavily with depression. And I remember I was on the agenda to speak, and when I got there, I'd been dealing with depression all week and hadn't prepared anything for my speech. And so I got up in front of my Toastmasters club and spoke for 5 minutes about how I was too depressed to develop a speech about speaking or to develop a speech according to whatever I had said I was going to speak about. And at the end of that, the Toastmaster, the MC, stood up and gave me a standing ovation. I'm just like, okay, that wasn't the response that I was expecting. And that didn't happen like every time, but that happened enough times that I began to think differently. Maybe the story that I've been telling myself, like you were saying, isn't the only way to look at what's happening. Maybe there's value and good in what I'm creating in my life, in my speaking, in my writing, in the different ways that I express myself and use creativity.
Yeah.
That
Definitely.
that we can be our creativity. Oftentimes, the other side of that is a lot of times our creativity is dampened by a well-meaning teacher or a well-meaning parent, or where we have that playfulness of youth that gets a lid put on it because someone doesn't like it or doesn't respond in the way that we would like them to respond, and we interpret their response to mean something different than probably what they intended it to mean.
Absolutely. I can't tell you the number of times I would take a new idea, a new creative thought, something that I was playing with, and bring it to my mom with the feeling of, I have a new plant and I'd like you to help me tend it and help it grow. But that's not how she took it. And so she said, oh, look at this lovely thing you've made. And it was like she picked the flower and stuck it in a vase on the table. And I'm so proud of you. You made this thing. And I'm like, no, you killed it. But my mom is always on the really practical side, and you have to do things that make sense, and were the thing that my dreams had nothing to do with sense and practicality. She wasn't the one to help me water these sprouts. She wasn't the right person for it, but I didn't have anyone else to go to at the time.
Yeah. So in that case, how do you respond to that? How did you continue to find your plants to express yourself in your creativity?
I withdrew inward for a really long time. And creativity was something I did for myself and nobody else. And I wouldn't do it with other people. And I didn't believe that anybody else would care about it. So in high school, I was in a synagogue that decided to put on a play, the musical, this Fiddler on the Roof. And of course, my twin brother was Tevye, the main character, of course. That was him. And I was like, I want to be one of the sisters. I want to have a part. I want to be up there. And I got up there and I looked at all the people, like in rehearsal, and I looked at all the people looking at me, and I'm like, I'm going to talk like this, and I'm really scared. And they're like, that's not a good part for you. So what can we do? Where can we put you? So they threw a sheet over me and had me be the ghost. And suddenly I'm up there belting, what is this about your daughter marrying my husband? And it was like having the sheet over me gave me permission to show up in a way that I couldn't do when I saw everybody looking at me.
Wow.
and I think so. I just kept finding places like that where it had to come out. The creativity and the play, it wanted to come out, but I was scared to let it out. I was scared of how people would respond to it. And so I found the spots where I was a little bit hidden and a little bit safer and a little bit more able to feel like I had some control over how much I showed up. And then I could play. And the more I learned that other people were not responding as negatively as my brain was responding, the easier it became to show up and be more of who I was in front of other people.
That's interesting. And I go back to your analogy about the plants and creativity, and something that I came across on a hike last Monday. And I was talking about, I was hiking through a forest with my family, and there was a couple little informational placards as we were hiking along. And one of them talked about the shade tolerant plants and about the light loving plants. And so often we think that, we need to be the light loving plants, that we need to be the ones that soak up. In order for us to be visible, in order for us to not be imposters, we need to play a role that doesn't feel comfortable for us. We need to be the fiddler on the roof, not, some ghost in the background. and it, as you're expressing that, I was thinking, maybe being a shade tolerant plant, going off that analogy, is okay. Maybe we need to have that shade in order for us to flourish. That we don't need the full-on sunlight, the full-on visibility in the spotlight, glaring in on us and saying, okay, shine. That when we allow ourselves to have more shade, that we can really shine in ways that we wouldn't otherwise.
Well, certainly there's ecological niches available for all different ways of being. Like the forest needs the shade tolerant plants as much as it needs the sun loving ones. And I think our world needs that as well. And everybody will resonate with different people. And so maybe those of us who need a little bit of shade and shelter will attract the people who also need a little bit of shade and shelter, who would be too scared to go join the ones that are in the full daylight. So yeah, I think there's definitely room for everybody. I also think that there's a way that we can sort of follow what feels right in the moment, that I am much more willing to show up now and be more visible, because then I was able to do it with the sheet over my head.
Exactly.
When I was developing this course that I have right now, that it was sort of following what feels like the thing that I want to bring into the world. And okay, I have this idea, I'm a little scared to show it to people. Oh, but I could show it to my best friend. That would be okay. Oh, okay, I've showed it to my best friend. Now I could show it to a few other people. That would be okay. And so it's sort of, you don't have to push yourself past where you're comfortable to be. Just take the next step. And then the next step. I don't have to see what like 10 miles down the road looks like. I just have to take the next step.
Yes. And we can be adaptable, and one of the ways that has shown up for me is I did and continue to do an awful lot of writing that the only person that ever reads it is me, and in that safe place, kind of in the shade, the maybe the harbor, or that I can explore and try things that I don't feel as ready to try out in the limelight. And then by giving myself the shade that I need, that I can grow and develop and maybe sink deeper roots, so that when I do have opportunities to be more visible, that I can thrive in that environment as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really important to figure out, how much shade or sun, or, where do we thrive?
Where do we
And,
thrive?
if we're seeking to overcome that imposter syndrome, then, perhaps what, in addition to the activity that we want to engage in, perhaps another thing to consider is, where will I best do this activity, and with whom will I best engage in this activity? So it's not just about, I think there's lots of different ways to look at that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, there's one of the things that I talk about imposter syndrome is what I mentioned, that when I mentioned other people will find things that they like that I don't like in my own, and I encourage people to talk to themselves the way they would talk to somebody that they cared about, or a small child. Like, would you talk to a 6-year-old and say, "That's terrible. How could you do that?" No, you wouldn't do that. But our own inner 6-year-olds are still listening to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And our own inner 6-year-olds are not going to come out and play if it's not safe. And if we're busy telling ourselves, "You suck," they're not going to come out and play. It has to be safe. They have to know that there's love and compassion and room for messiness and mistakes, but also room for play and growth and creativity and fun. And that's, but that we don't let ourselves have that play and creativity and fun if we're busy putting ourselves down. So how can we talk to ourselves as though we were still the little 6-year-olds that we care about and want to nurture?
Absolutely. When I realized that, I actually remember I don't remember the exact day. I remember where I was and what happened for me when I realized that I could, instead of being my biggest critic, I could be my biggest cheerleader. And again, I was struggling with depression, kind of a theme to my life.
I can relate.
And I was sitting in bed, just kind of my back up against the headboard. And I was feeling pretty down about being depressed. I was beating myself up about being depressed. Oh man, you did this to yourself again, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly I just had this thought, instead of being such a critic and being so harsh on myself about this, what if I actually took the different approach and, just really cheered myself on for doing what I am doing, and even though that was like a really simple moment, there wasn't, the skies didn't open, and angels didn't sing, and unicorns didn't show up at the end of the bed, but it made a huge impact in my life, that I could look for what I'm doing well, and when things are not going so well, that I can say, you're human, you gave your best effort, you tried, it didn't work out this time, maybe next time, or maybe there's a different way to look at this, or way to do it.
Absolutely. You listen to people's stories, and it sounds like people have huge epiphanies, and something happens and you make a 90-degree turn in your life. And my experience is that it doesn't happen that way, that you make a 1-degree shift, and that, or at least I make 1-degree shifts. And when I make over time, 1 degree can put you in a very different place. If you go across an ocean and you're 1 degree off of where you meant to go, you'll land in a different country than you intended to.
Yes. Yeah.
And you get enough 1-degree shifts and you can end up at 90 degrees off from where you started. But it doesn't, for me, it doesn't happen all at once. So it's that oh, I could be nicer to myself. I could notice the things that I'm doing right. Oh, I could realize that I'm human and therefore will never be perfect. And still appreciate the effort that went into it, even if it didn't work right.
Right.
Oh, I could focus more on the process than on the product. Oh, I could realize that my insides and my outsides don't match, and other people looking at me aren't going to realize how much of a mess I feel. And I had this conversation in college where this woman came, a friend of mine said to me, you know, I wish I were as together as you are. And I'm like, me? I wish I were as together as you are. And she was like, me? And we both of us turned and looked at this guy next to us and we're like, well, at least he's got it together. And he looked at us and he was like, me?
And it sounds like that happened naturally. It wasn't a scripted thing that you did on stage.
No, it wasn't at all scripted. It was one of those, like, I had no idea that they could feel as unprepared and much of an imposter as I felt, because they looked like they had it all together. And I was like, oh, they think I have it all together. Wow, I must look really different on the outside than I feel on the inside. It was a huge revelation, but it was also a 1 degree shift. You know, it was not a, now my life is entirely different, because that would be scary. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But 1 degree.
Well, that's a really good point. You know, I often talk about 1% incremental improvements, that if you can just improve just 1% today over what you did yesterday, that if you do that consistently over the course of a year, you get a 3,800% improvement, right? But I really like the idea that if you change just 1 degree in where you're headed, that over time, and in 90 days, you get a 90-degree change in direction, right? That it doesn't have to be, okay, we're going to whip on the steering wheel and go from here to here and get whiplash.
Exactly.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So tell me one thing, as you were talking about that, a quote came to my mind yesterday, and it was that very large ships are steered by very small helms. And I went searching for that quote, and I'm like, I don't know where that came from, who said that. I don't know if it was Ralph Waldo Emerson or, you know, Thoreau or whatever. It turns out that it was found in the New Testament in James. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But I mean, and the idea is, the reason I'm making this connection, trying to make this connection, is that you use creativity in order to help people get in touch with their spiritual side. So tell me, what's the connection between creativity and spirituality? And does that relate to the imposter syndrome?
I feel like there's a number of connections between creativity and spirituality. I feel like the way I've been using creativity as a microcosm to help people look at themselves is doing spiritual work in a way, because it affects how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world and how we connect to other people and connect to the world around us. I also feel like when I can be creative without expectations, just creative for the sake of being creative and playful and exploratory and enjoying the process, regardless of what the outcome looks like, that space that I go into is the space I go into when I am walking in the woods, or when I'm by the ocean, or when I, feel connected to the life force of the universe. So that it feels like that is being spiritual. That is that connection to something bigger than me. And sometimes that leads to downloads of ideas that I don't know where they came from. I don't remember thinking them, but somehow suddenly they're there. I feel like this is the way the universe whispers in our ears, and we have to make space to be able to hear it. If we're too busy telling ourselves that we're no good, we're not going to be able to hear those whispers from the universe. But this is how the universe gets their ideas out, is through us. So when we can be receptive in those spaces of creativity and playfulness, and it gives us a chance to hear something that's more guidance than gremlin. We get a chance to actually listen to what feels really resonant to us.
Yeah. That's interesting that you bring that up. I was pondering the difference between I'm reading this book called Alone Together, and it's this collection of all these different writers from all different areas, and they're experiencing COVID-19. And as I'm reading this, I'm just struck by, and there's dozens of contributors that are in this book, and they each have their own experience, their own expression in the way that they relate to and share their COVID experience. And the thought that came to mind for me was just, these people have figured out a way, have found their voice, which is one of the things I've been talking about this week on my personal Facebook lives, is, how do you find your voice? What does that even mean? Don't we, I'm using my voice right now,
Yeah.
But I think there's something different than that. I liken it in one way to watching a friend when he plays the piano and he just really gets into the music, right? I mean, he's just like very there's a lot of physicality to the way that he plays the piano. It's this whole body experience, and it's really amazing to watch. And then I watch my wife, who's very technically skilled at playing the piano or the organ or whatever. But for her, it's just, it's more about the technicalities of it than it is. She doesn't move and doesn't get into the music in the same way as my friend does. And both of them are doing what they do. And I'm not saying one's better than the other or whatever. It's just different experiences. And similarly, I'm thinking that one of the ways that we get in touch with that kind of more full-bodied experience, more of that that deeper experience, is through creativity, is by trying things that we haven't tried before. It's not just, hitting the right notes. It's about those notes being more than just notes, right? That there's something more to it, something more spiritual perhaps to it than just the keys on the keyboard.
I think there's a lot of room for emotion in music. And my dad's a professional musician, and he didn't move a lot when he performed, but you could feel the emotion coming through. Like it was channeled right through the music. There was a lot of heart to what he was performing. I actually like an analogy to dance, because I took some dance classes in college. I actually decided that I already knew I was a brain, but I wasn't sure I was a body. And so I wasn't, I decided that rather than taking an honors thesis, I would take a dance class. Oh, that was hard.
It would be hard for me too.
But there was something about the energy of the dance that you could be technically perfect, but if your hand just went so far and then stopped, like the energy stopped at your fingertips, that wasn't dance. That was just a technical move. But if you could have the energy stretched out past your fingertips and just keep going, and then you pull it back, and then move out, it's like that was dance. And that was moving the energy in yourself, through yourself, through the room, through other people. And that was where the magic happened.
Huh. Wow. That's a really great analogy. For one thing, I am not a dancer. I don't know if I would ever be a dancer. Maybe I would have to definitely put a lot more time into it than I do currently. But so there's that hesitation about, showing up on the dance floor and, feeling the music. And the other thing about it is I'm reminded of when I took Tai Chi and, the idea of Chi. One of the first things that we did in the class was one person put their hand on the other person's shoulder and the other person tried to bring your arm down, right? And when you just did that and you just use muscle to resist, eventually they bring your arm down. But then if you imagined the Chi, which is the energy force of the universe, essentially, going from your fingers out to into the universe. When they tried to bring your arm down, they couldn't move it. There was just so much different of an experience when we connected with that energetic force of the universe, the chi.
So I actually am reminded of some studies by Amy Cuddy. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah.
She did a really neat TED talk and about how your body and your emotions both feed each other.
Yes.
And that you can tell yourself so if you can frown in response to feeling something that upsets you, but if your face is naturally in a frowny face, then your body thinks you're upset even if you're not. So you can trick your body into feeling like it's happier by smiling at things. And I was like, this feels stupid.
Yeah.
But I practiced going out on my walks and smiling, like finding things to smile at. Oh, there's a bird singing. I'm going to consciously smile because I hear the bird singing. And after a while, I found like that my walks were full of joy, and I felt so happy and like more connected with the world around me by consciously trying to change the physicality of myself and the energy that I was bringing to things, like bringing the smile instead of the frown. And she also talks about feeling more confident if you're in confident poses and like taking superhero poses. And if you do that before a job interview, you can come across as more confident and more likely to get hired by having just spending a few minutes in a pose that feels really confident as opposed to one that's kind of slumped. So it's another thing that I talk to my people about with imposter syndrome is that you can hack yourself in these ways.
Yeah.
And even if you just make yourself feel a little more confident, even if it's not like a 90-degree shift, if it's a 1-degree shift, it can still make that difference between how you feel, not just how you show up to other people, but how you feel inside, and feel a little bit less like an imposter.
Yes. And she is such a good example of that too. I read her book as well as watched her TED talk, and I don't know where she talked about, probably both places, but she was a college student, went to Wyoming with some friends, got thrown out of the back of a Jeep, had major brain trauma, and was able to rebuild her life by learning more about how to do things like that. And ended up, she's now a professor at least last I knew, she was a professor at Harvard.
Yeah, the brain has a lot of neuroplasticity. If you know how to use it, it's really cool. Yeah.
So those little 1-degree improvements can really turn things around.
Absolutely.
We don't have to go again, do the whiplash from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. We can just do incremental improvements that help us move in the right direction.
Yes.
Well, Talia, thank you so much for our conversation today. I've really gained a lot from it. I've got a few questions to ask you at the end.
Okay.
One, how can people learn more about your creativity club that you do on Thursday nights? And I can put the link down below, but tell us just a real teaser about what that is.
Okay. So I've been doing that for a year in the COVID time. It started out as just a chance to connect with some friends and play some games. And I try out different stuff, and sometimes it bombs and sometimes it's a lot of fun and you never know what you're going to get. But we do things like progressive haiku, where 3 different people will give the different lines of the haiku, or bad poetry prompts, or we put prompts in the chat and then everyone picks one and has to write a really bad poem about it. We do doodle, like you make a shape on your page and now it's a map, and what's it a map of, and what are the pieces of it, or maybe it's not a map, maybe it's a flower, and what is it going to look, so we drawing and writing, a little bit of improv, all things we can do on Zoom. And it's just for fun. I don't go deep. Like with my group, I go deep, but this is just fun.
Excellent. So the last two questions I have for you is, the first one is, what makes for a richer story in your mind?
That's a big question. We're running out of time. Let me ask you the big one. What makes for a richer story? I feel like my life has gotten richer the more compassion I have. Compassion for myself and compassion for other people. So when I have compassion for myself and say, well, that didn't go the way I wanted, but it was still good, and there's still value, and I still have value. And when I have compassion for other people and say, well, maybe that wasn't what they wanted either. Or boy, I've made some choices that I wish I hadn't. Maybe that was a choice they wish they hadn't. Or maybe there's always room for change and love and growth. And coming at things from a place of compassion has made it that just feels a lot richer, where before it was, this is right, that's wrong, no possibility of crossing the line. And that's pretty dry. There's not a lot of growth and change available there.
Wow. Well, for being on the spot, that was an awesome answer. So the last question I have to ask you is, how are you adding more richer stories to your treasury of stories?
Well, COVID put a halt to a lot of things, but then my stories didn't want to stop, which is why I started the Creativity Club. I'm always looking for ways and places for my own quirkiness to fit. Like I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but there's a tribe of people that like this kind of quirkiness. And how can I shine enough of a light that they can find me? And how can I look for their lights so I can join them? And then we can make a richer story together than we could individually.
Wow.
So that's what I'm trying to do.
Another fantastic answer. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your light with us today. And for our viewers, remember, each week at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, we have these Stories of Gold conversations where we bring in an expert like Talia in order to share their lights and help us to find our richer stories and reach our desired destination. Until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark night.